I love it when screws are already stripped before I get to them. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stable. In this video, we're gonna be working on the boat. For those of you that might have missed the last video on this car, this is a 1954 GLASSPAR G2. And for those of you doing the math, that is 70 years old. In the last video on this car, we discussed its unique quirks, rich history. We also covered the overall restoration plan for this car, which did ruffle some feathers, mainly because of the changes we're gonna be making during this restoration. One of those changes is the engine. No, we aren't coyote swapping this thing like some of you suggested. A coyote engine in this car would be absolutely terrifying. I can assure you guys it won't be anything crazy. It will be period correct. Like I said, I'm not gonna give too much away, but it will be a period correct engine. Another thing people were upset about was the plans for the gauge cluster. I completely agree that these gauges are awesome, more specifically the manifold pressure gauge, because that's not something you usually see on a car. But one thing I had not shown you guys is that under these awesome gauges is another jungle of wires. So you guys can see how much fun we're going to have. So when I said that all of the gauges are going to have to come out, I didn't necessarily mean that they were coming out permanently, but everything has to come out and be disassembled in order for us to redo it in a cleaner and safer way. As far as choosing what gauges stay and what gauges get removed permanently from the car, that decision is not up to me, guys. Like I've said before, this is not my car. The actual owner of this car has the final decision to do what he wants with the car, really. And some of you guys will be happy to know that the owner is in contact with the family of the original builder. In no way, shape, or form are we trying to erase the history that came with this car, but there is quite a few things that require a modern update. And also, for those of you that said we're not competent enough to do this restoration, let me show you something. This, my friends, is a real YouTube plaque. Now, do you think we would have received that if we weren't skilled enough? They only give these to professionals. Back to the point of this video, there is a million ways to start a restoration on a car. Contrary to popular belief, there is no one right way of doing it. It all depends on the car, as well as the budget, the overall plan, and what tools you have available. Every car that I've built in the past has had a completely different restoration process when compared to each other. So looking at the major objectives for this GLASSPAR being paint and body, engine swap, and a full rewire, no matter what we would choose to go with first, the body of the car has to come off. Interestingly enough, this car can run and drive without the body on it. So without any further delay, let's put some wrenches on this car and start this restoration. Also, during the disassembly, we are also going to be taking a deeper look at the overall condition of this car. But another thing that usually comes along with disassembly is finding other gremlins. Hopefully that is not the case, but that is usually what happens. One interesting thing that I'm noticing is all throughout the car, there are multiple wooden spacers used. And as you guys know, one thing about wood is that it does not age very well. So we are going to have to either remake them out of wood or find another alternative the same size. These bolts definitely feel like they've been on there for 70 years. These bumperettes come off individually, and this corner piece as well. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, look at that, guys. The bumper alone consists of 11 pieces. We have 1/3 of the bumper face, 2 bumper brackets, 1 bumperette, the middle section of the bumper face, 2 more bumper brackets on the bottom, another bumperette, and then 2 more brackets and another 1/3, because 1-piece bumpers are overrated. An easy trick in order to not lose your bolts and your hardware that I use no matter what car I'm working on is to just thread it back into whatever it was already threaded into. And now that everything is bolted up back together, we have one entire bumper rather than 11 different pieces of the bumper. So now we don't have to put different things in different baggies and label them left piece bumper, right piece bumper. Now it's all one piece and can be stored as such. I'm also very interested to see how this grill comes off. To remove the grill, I do need a little bit more ground clearance. So We're gonna place it on some dollies. Should give us more than enough room. All right, looking at it from the underside, we now have a rear view of the grill as well as all the hardware. Also, look at that, guys. The grill has some wooden shims on either side of the grill, and some people might underestimate the importance of those shims, so they might just toss them and throw them away, and then once they go to reinstall this grill, they'll notice it's not fitting well or the gaps are incorrect. So we definitely need to keep track of those shims in order to, I don't think we're gonna reuse them, but we are gonna have to remake them. There's the wood shim. Oh, my mistake. It's not wood, it's rubber. Definitely looked like wood to me. All right, I think we should be off. Oh, look at that save. Holy crap. It looks kind of funny now without the grill. Taking a look at the hardware for the grill, you can see the shims that I was talking about. They are slightly angled, so we are somehow going to have to replicate that. There's also some Teflon or thread sealant on some of the hardware, which makes me think that some of the threads on the actual grill might be cross-threaded or stripped. Once again, I'm going to add all the hardware back where it belongs. That way when we store it and pick it back up to reinstall, all the hardware is in its proper place. This doesn't look very right. Also, here's a better look at that wooden spacer that I was talking about. Obviously pretty aged, so we are going to have to replicate this either with a rubber one or another wooden one. So not only do we have to be a mechanic, we also have to be a carpenter. The headlights are also mounted in a very interesting way. If we take a look at the mounting studs, we'll see a bunch of washers. About half a dozen on the right, 2 on the bottom, and 1 on the other side. And that's interesting because most cars nowadays have a headlight adjustment screw in order to aim it upwards, downwards, or side to side. But 70 years ago, the builder of this car used washers, and I mean, it works. So that is something good to note, because when we reassemble this car, we want to put the same amount of washers back in order to get that proper headlight adjustment. And if it's off, then we can adjust accordingly. This is pretty interesting. There is an adjustment screw for the headlight in here, but there was a lot of washers. Okay. Luckily, the headlight does have a junction or a disconnect right here, so we can easily disconnect it and reconnect it when we need it again. Turn signal is just 2 bolts. All right, same thing on this side. Eyeball comes out. Turn signal is glued with paint. This side also has an assortment of washers on the headlight studs, which is interesting because the headlight housing itself has adjustment screws. So maybe the washers on there are to make up the discrepancies within the fiberglass, and then the adjustment screws on the housing itself is for the fine tuning of it. A lot of the hardware that we're removing, we're likely not going to use again. We'll probably get new nuts and bolts, but we're still going to keep them just so we could get the correct size. Moving sections, another thing that desperately needs attention is these doors. They have a lot of up and down movement, which when they are closed, they make contact with this quarter panel area, therefore chipping and damaging the fiberglass. Also, check out these door hinges. Bet you haven't seen this before on a car. I mean, I'm sure it worked well when it was installed, but if we could find a better way of securing these doors, we will do so. If not, I mean, we'll just refurbish or reinstall a new one of these. We are going to remove the doors. Luckily, it is only 3 bolts on the hinges. All right. There goes door number 1. Considering this is fiberglass, this door is still pretty heavy. Also, for things like this, I don't really like using the impact because, things like this, I don't really like using the impact because, well, the condition of these bolts are not always the greatest. So you're more likely to break something, even with some light ugga-duggas. Alrighty, now we can move on to the windshield, which should be fun because look at these bolts. Oh yeah, that's corrosion and rust for you. Before we can do that, we gotta take off these little wiper arms. Okay. I'm debating whether to remove the glass entirely as the windshield comes out whole, or we can take it out piece by de-trimming the windshield, then take out one piece of glass and then another piece of glass and then take off the bottom trim. I'm gonna see if it'll come out whole, and if it doesn't work, well, then we'll do it piece by piece. And the awesome thing about being a short Mexican is that you fit pretty much anywhere. I'm only gonna loosen up the bolts, but I'm not gonna remove them just to see what the windshield is doing. All right, so I removed the 2 bolts that are holding this center section in, which coincidentally, they were also tied into the wiper motor arms. So now there is 3 bolts holding this area, those rusty ones that you saw, and 3 more on the other side. I'm going to leave these little support arms just so when we remove the 3 bolts, the windshield won't collapse on us. All right, with those bolts out of the way, now we're gonna remove the little support beams and see what the windshield wants to do. Okay, change of plans. Okay, so we aren't gonna take it out as a whole, but rather 2 halves, because there's nothing connecting these 2 on the bottom, so there's no support here, it's just a gasket. So once we lift off both of them, they're gonna separate. Oh, I love it when screws are already stripped before I get to them. Great, 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 great. You can see just how stripped it is, but this is a good time to test out these pliers, these twin grip pliers, and look at that. Easy peasy. Back to it again. Oop, I feel it. And we're off. This middle section should come out. Yep. And since this bolt is stripped, we're gonna go ahead and remove the glass from this frame. Okay. That's a big screw. Oh yeah. All right, windshield is off. It looks kind of cool. Just like that, it looks very streamlined, very Speed Racer-like. Not gonna lie, it looks kind of mean. We might as well take off the hood. God damn, oh my God. Look at that, guys. That is not the same GLASSPAR we started with earlier. It is now stripped of its body panels. It now looks like how it would have looked if, say, you ordered this car in the 50s and this is how I delivered it. This is a really good point to have the car at, because now we can start either paint and body work, or we can lift the body off of the car and start the wiring. And with the body off of the car, it would be a good time to figure out the engine swap situation. Before we can do anything else though, we have to figure out how we're going to get the body off of the car, if we're using 4 strong people to pick it up or make a jig to pick it up. But we also have to figure out where we want to put the body, if we want to make a jig with some rolling casters so we could roll the fiberglass shell, or we can hang it from the roof like a chandelier. I've seen it done before. Regardless of what step we decide to take next, we're at a pretty good stopping point. So we'll get back to work on either the scraps thing or the GLASSPAR in the next video. With that being said, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you on the next one.